The topic of this video is the weighted average cost of capital, also called WACC. As you might know of the previous videos, is that WACC is actually a discount rate. And discount rates are used to make future cash flow streams into present value streams. This is done by discounting, of course. Well, importantly here is to maybe define what actually a cash flow is. And here, for our WACC video, we want to determine that cash flow is actually here the free cash flow. And free cash flows simply refer to the fact that it becomes available to all the investors of a firm. So both share and bond or debt holders of a firm. Well, here you see also the formula, which is applicable to the free cash flow. And as you see, these are all financial cash flows. For instance, the EBIT or the CapEx, and of course the changes in net working capital. But also here you see the depreciation kicking in, and this is due to the fact that this is actually not a financial cash flow, but rather an accounting cash flow. And you see it here popping up because it refers to the tax shield concerning depreciation expenses. Well, back to our previous videos, we've seen and we determined what value is. Well, here in the numerator part, we used free cash flows, as we just determined. Well, in the denominator, you see the discount factor. Of course, here we use WACC, because WACC stems from the fact that it is the weighted average cost of capital. So it's the cost of capital that the firm pays to the average investor. So here the average investor is a combination of debt and equity investors. And that's the reason why we want to tie the WACC to the free cash flow here. What is WACC then? Well, WACC, as said earlier, it's the weighted average cost of capital. In order to denote and define this in a, let's say, formula setting, we have to turn to this very formula here. That consists of two parts. First of all, the equity component part, and the right-hand side here of the formula shows you the debt component, or the cost of debt component factor. So for WACC, it's very important that these two streams mean that the higher the risk is, so both for cost of equity and cost of debt, the larger the required return is. So the higher the risk, the higher the expected return. And this is also found in the CAPM formula, because CAPM determines the expected and required then cost of equity. So the larger the risk here, and this for equity is denoted by means of market risk, the higher the expected return. So we all know the capital asset pricing model, maybe from previous courses, but for those who don't know, in a visual format, it's also called the security market line. So the larger the beta, which is on the x-axis, the larger is the required or expected return here. And we know that, for instance, the market itself has a beta of 1. So the required and expected return of the market portfolio is simply the risk-free rate plus the required return of the market itself, the risk premium. So what we have then, that the higher the beta, the higher the expected return. So there is a monotonic increase with respect to beta and required return or expected return. What about cost of debt? Well, also here, the higher the risk, the higher the return we demand for sources of debt. So cost of debt is simply nothing else as the cost when it comes to debt financing. And we know that debt can come in different forms, for instance, bonds, bank debt, subordinated debt, senior debt. Well, all these forms, well, simply use this idea of the larger the risk, the higher the required cost of debt here. Well, one way to think about this is by means of credit spreads. They stem from credit ratings that are spitted out by rating agencies, and they assess the creditworthiness of an issue or of a company. And of course, the more safety or the more safe a rating, the lower the credit spread is. So the spread says something on the premium on top of the risk-free rate at the most safety investment, here being government debt. Of course, here two extremes AAA paper compared to C or D rated paper. And of course here you see that the spread over time on average is of course increases for the, let's say, less quality credit ratings. Of course, risk also increases with time to maturity of investments, and especially for debt investment, because there is typically a specified term stipulated in the debt contract. And then what you see here is of course that the larger the maturity of a debt investment is, the larger the required return is. Well, this means that the yield curve is upward sloping. And this is what we see in, let's say, in normal economic environments. Currently, there's also an increasing yield curve. But importantly, in this graph, we also see that the spread is also increasing. So not only the maturity tells you on the required cost of debt, but also the spread over time might increase. And this, of course, is very important for, let's say, the quality of debt here. So the higher the quality of an investment issue, in this case then debt, of course the lower the required return is on this debt issue.